Hey guys, it's Tori, and today there's kind of chaos going on in my house because my mom's cleaning lady is here, and so you may hear vacuuming, you may hear banging, but I don't really have another time to do this, so we're doing it now. Sorry about that. Hopefully it won't be too bad. It won't capture too much of the audio on here, but I did want to go over my goals for 2023. I, in the past, have done a lot of very measurable things. I have like checklists and things that I do, and I do really like that, but the goals that I want to set this year are a little more, I don't really have as much of a checklist set thing. I just want to do more of certain things. And I maybe should look a little deeper into like what I've been doing in the past and maybe make it measurable as like read 5 more than I've read last year or something like that. We'll see if I end up doing detailed things that way. That may be just probably my own personal way to measure it. I probably won't discuss it really on here, but I did want to still set some general goals. I do have at least one that's a little more specific. The rest are more just, like I said, read more of this genre or whatever. So let's just get right into this. The first goal, or I guess intention, since it's not really, like I said, it's not very measurable, is I want to read more fantasy this year. When I was younger, I pretty much only read fantasy. I did read some like historical fiction and contemporary periodically, but most of it was fantasy, and I really enjoyed it. And then I kind of came home, and I think a lot of it was because I was reading a lot of YA fantasy. So when I came home from my religious mission after 18 months of being away right after high school, I started reading some of those things, and I just wasn't as into them. And so I kind of just started reading classics and historical fiction more, and did really enjoy those a lot more. So fell into that. But recently, if you've been watching my vlogs, you'll know that I've started reading a little bit more Brandon Sanderson. Really, I just read Elantris earlier this year, a couple months ago, and really enjoyed it. I'm so glad I was able to get back into that series, and I decided I wanted to read all of the Cosmere, well, reread a lot of it because I have read most of it, but also read the things that I have not read, and I'd like to do it in publication order. So that is my goal, is to read those, but also just fantasy in general. Like I said, I do have the first book in the Wheel of Time series, as well as Assassin's Apprentice, so the start of Robin Hobbs's kind of world series that she has going, or that she had going, I guess it's over. So I have those. I also have a few other fantasy works. I have fantasy as one of my groups on my 2023 First Reads tournament that I have going on. So I already own options. I just want to be reading more of them this year. So that is one of my goals, the first of my goals, to get back into fantasy. Most of it will be adult fantasy. I do have 1 or 2 YA fantasies that I still am interested in, but for the most part, I will be reading more adult fantasy. Again, I still love historical fiction classics, so I'm still going to be reading those things, but I'd like to add a little bit more fantasy in there, which reading more fantasy, it's not going to take too much because I really have not read, like I said, hardly any at all in the past couple of years. My second goal is to read more nonfiction, and I had this goal before. I've had it in the past. I did this year have a goal. One of my goals, I kind of separated it by quarters. Nonfiction is something that it's kind of new to me. Like, I, for a long time, wasn't really interested in nonfiction, but recently I've become a lot more interested. I've liked listening to audiobooks of nonfiction. I have also read a little bit physically more recently. I've kind of developed to the point where I feel more comfortable doing that. I do prefer to break it up. I can't really just sit down and read a nonfiction very well, but I have been physically reading it a little bit more. And I have a whole shelf of nonfiction books, just one, so not a ton, but I have a shelf full of nonfiction books, and I have only read like 4 of them. So I really need to focus on that a lot more, and so that is my goal, to get through that shelf a lot more, if I purchase any more, to read those as well. My third goal is to read more post-Victorian classics. So I have my shelves separated. You can kind of see part of it here, but I have the classics section of my shelves split into pre-Victorian, Victorian era, but in other countries besides the UK, Victorian books, books, and then post-Victorian books. That is how my classic shelves are organized. Pre-Victorian I haven't read that much, but they're also just different enough for me that I don't mind that I'm slowly working through them. Plus I have Ancients-a-thon that I will likely still do, and that encourages me to read a bit more of that. Plus I have in my next goal, the last goal that I'm going to mention for reading, at least one of the things I'll mention in that is a pre-Victorian work. So anyway, all that to say, my other sections I'm working through at a solid pace for what I would like to, but post-Victorian I have only read about 30% of the books that I own in that category, and a lot of them I've owned for a while. So I just want to read more of those post-Victorian classics. A lot of them just tend to be a little more out of my comfort zone, just the types of stories and the types of writing that are involved in a lot of post-Victorian works, the kind of like stream of consciousness vibe. Some of the other kind of more psychologically driven, like less plot-driven novels that I feel like exist in the post-Victorian era. There's plot, it's not like it's non-existent, but it's just a little bit different. It's a little more focused on character than plot, which I'm a character-driven reader anyway, but I feel like modern books do a good combo. Modern as in recently published, but post-Victorian kind of classics, that early 1900s era, it was a little more character focused with a little less focus on the plot. Basically, it's a lot of philosophies that that are being explored, and psychological philosophies that I don't always agree with or haven't explored very much, and so it's just a little out of my comfort zone sometimes. But I do have a lot that I'm excited to read, so I just need to do it, basically. Will, of course, still be reading 19th century literature, 1800s literature, because it is my favorite, but I do want to read more 20th century literature if possible this year. Even if I could get it down to like 60-40, like 60% read and 40% not read by the end of the year, I would feel great about that. So hopefully that will be possible. We will see. My fourth and final reading goal for the year, I want to have a year of King Arthur. I have been inspired to do more writing recently. I kind of gave up on it a few years ago, not in like a discouragement way. I wasn't like discouraged or feeling like, oh, I can never do this. Maybe a little bit, but not in like a negative way. It was more just like, oh, I just like to read, and I just felt like I couldn't really write the types of books that I like to read, and so I felt like I would rather just read. And it wasn't like I was feeling down on myself. Like, I want to make that very clear. It wasn't like a negative thing. It was just like, I'll just read. I'm just a reader, and that's great, and I can talk about books. But recently I don't want to get too deep into it, but basically I've been really struggling to figure out what I want to do with my life. I did graduate with my bachelor's in psychology. Thought psychology was what I wanted to go into, and it may still be. I just haven't found a specific area that I know I would want to focus on, and a specific job that I felt like would really feel challenging to me, but also within my comfort zone, if you know what I mean. And so I've been struggling a lot with that. So I just kind of decided, you know what, maybe I just need to try some other projects that I've had on my mind and see what opportunities come from that. I currently work in a religious bookstore. I'm mostly focused on the religious clothing section of the bookstore. That's what I supervise over. And I'm willing to kind of work my way up in that company because I do really love it, but I also kind of am making connections there. And so I have two books that I've been interested in writing, one fiction and one nonfiction. The nonfiction is a little bit more religious centered, but more like my experience being a young adult in the culture that my religion has created, and just kind of dealing with that while also building up a relationship with God. That whole thing is not something I talk about on here because this is for just all my other reading basically, but that is a book that I am considering writing. Also, there's a fiction book that I want to write that would be a King Arthur retelling, which I know everybody does. It's just a classic, like everybody wants to do it. But it's something I'm really passionate about. It's a story I'm really passionate about, that I've thought about for a long time, that I'm like, you know what, I may as well just do it. Even if it never gets published, even if it's just like another King Arthur retelling for other people, it will mean a lot to me. And right now I just need stuff like that. So I want to read more King Arthur stuff this year just to kind of help me in that process of writing it. I will be starting to write it before I necessarily finish reading everything, but I'm hoping the reading will help to clean things up and help me come up with other ideas for specific things that could happen. I want the story that I've thought of in my head to be a series, so it will be a lot of work, but yeah. Basically, I want to have a Year of King Arthur so I can continue in that vein and feeling inspired with that. So for this, I have a few plans. The first one, and the most specific, the one book I'm definitely going to read for this, is Le Morte d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Malory. This is kind of the first full-length version of King Arthur's story. I'm planning on reading like 10 pages a day starting January 1st and then just going with it through whenever it takes me. Like if I have to miss a day because it's busy, that's fine. I'm not going to double up. If I will be skipping Sundays because I just do that, unless I feel like really like I want to read more one day or whatever, that's totally possible. But I just want to slowly get through this and finish it. It's such a chunky book, which is why I'm just taking it slow. I don't want to stress myself out with it, but I do want to read it all the way through, and probably take notes as I go for things that stand out to me. So yes, I will be for sure reading this. As for other like more specific like King Arthur classics, like this is the King Arthur story, I do also have the Howard Pyle version, King Arthur and His Knights. I have that. It was buried in one of my stacks, so I did not want to pull it out right now, but I do have that. I also have The Once and Future King by T.H. White, which is a huge classic of King Arthur, so I will be likely reading that, or at least I have the potential to read that. I also really love this cover, by the way. And I would love to read The Idylls of the King by Lord Tennyson. I actually have a copy of that right here. Idylls of the King. I would love to read this, as well as some of the other poems in it that have to do with King Arthur. I have read The Lady of Shalott already, but I would be willing to reread it for this. So anyway, want to read this as well. So those are the classics that I have as possibilities, and then Le Morte d'Arthur, like I said, is a for sure. I also wouldn't mind reading Tristan and Isolde by, I can't remember the author's name, or Sir Percival, which I also don't know the author's name for that, but some of those, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, I also wouldn't mind rereading. I have read it a couple times, so that one I may not be as inclined to read, but it is really short, so maybe I will reread that one. I also have some more recent retellings that I would love to give a shot. So first of all, we have The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell, which I've heard great things about. I know David Wiley really enjoyed this when he read it, I think earlier this year or last year. He said it was one of his favorite King Arthur retellings that he's read, so would love to read this. I also have here Lancelot by Giles Christian. Now, Jennifer Brooks actually recommended this to me, and at first, I have never really been interested in Lancelot, I'm not going to lie. If you know me at all, you know that I really don't like cheating in books. It's a hard sell for me. Sometimes it's done in a way that I don't want to say get behind it a little more, because I never like cheating, but when it's handled, the situation is handled in a solid, positive way, then I can be more okay with it. But like stories like Helen and Paris of Troy, I really don't like that. And then Lancelot and Guinevere. But after reading Half Sick of Shadows, which is actually right there, earlier this year, it's one of the best King Arthur retellings I've read. Not that I've read that many, but I really enjoyed it. And Lancelot in that was really interesting, and so I kind of developed more of an interest in Lancelot as a character. So it pushed me to actually get this recommendation that Jennifer Brooks gave me, and yeah. So I'm excited to give this a shot. We'll see how it goes when I'm able to get to it, like with all of these. I think it's a duology as well, so if I really like it, I could get the second book. I think The Winter King, in fact, I know The Winter King is also a first book in a series, so I have options there. I know there are a lot of other King Arthur retellings, so let me know down below some of your favorites. I will say right now, I will not read The Mists of Avalon by, Marion Zimmer Bradley, is that the right name? Anyway, I will not read it because of personal reasons. First of all, just some of the content that I've heard about that just isn't really me. Also, I know things about the author. There are things about the author. If you haven't heard about that, you can look it up. I'm not one to usually like avoid authors based on like their opinions or anything. Like that's just not my feeling. But when it comes to actions, I don't really feel comfortable talking about her on my channel when she has done certain things or allowed certain things to be done the way she did. So yes, I'm just not interested in reading that series. I will say every time I see it in a used bookstore, I'm mildly like curious, but I've made the decision not to, so I'm just not going to do it even when I do have those moments of curiosity. But if there are other King Arthur retellings that you know about that you really like, please let me know and we'll see if I get to them. I do have a lot of reading to do this year based on these goals, so we'll see. But that's what I have right now. The last one I do want to mention, I will be willing to read some nonfiction kind of centered around King Arthur. So right now I have The Discovery of King Arthur by Jeffrey Ashe. I don't know anything about this. I'm not sure. I'm assuming it's kind of talking about historians and figuring out who the real King Arthur was, things like that. This is also an older book. I think it's from like the 60s. So it may not be, it probably isn't. In fact, it's 100% not going to be up to date. Oh, it's from the 80s. So anyway, it's old, but I thought it looked fun. And I noticed it on a few lists about King Arthur books. So I'm going to give it a try. If you know of other nonfiction that is interesting about King Arthur or have heard about some, please let me know that as well, as I would love to know. So those are my reading goals, some brief kind of discussion of channel goals. So I've mentioned earlier this year when I decided to stop doing wrap-ups, which was just a couple months ago, that I really want to do more vlogs. I really want to do more reading rambles and maybe kind of more recent reads if I end up not vlogging. We'll see how that goes. I do intend to continue that. I just have really loved, some of my favorite videos to watch recently are like themed reading vlogs, and I just want to do more of that. So yes, that's what I'm going to do, especially just when it's been kind of hard to get myself to formally film videos very often. It's just nice to be able to sit down wherever pretty much and just do a quick clip. So I do think I want to stick with that. I'll probably do a vlog of my experience with Le Morte d'Arthur, probably, so you can watch out for that. I do want to get back into tags a little bit more. I haven't done very many recently. I do want to be very particular about what tags I do, so please still tag me in things because I always want the option and it may push me, but I'm sorry if I don't end up getting to the tags. There's several tags that I have not gotten to that I know I've been tagged in, which is really unfortunate, but it just happens. And yeah, I just really want to be careful about what tags I'm doing, especially because I only usually post once a week, sometimes twice if I need to, but most of the time it's just once. So because of that, I just want to make sure I'm making videos that I really enjoy making and that I'd enjoy watching. That's really what I want to focus on this year. I mean, I've done that in the past as well, but sometimes I've just kind of been like, maybe I'll do this, and then I kind of lose steam over it, and then I film it and I'm not as excited about it. So I just want to be excited about everything I put up this year if possible. I also would love to do an original tag this year. I've thought a lot about doing it in the past. I haven't ever come up with a specific idea. I just want to make sure it has questions that would interest me. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about that. So I would like to do that at least once this year. I am still planning to do Ancients-a-thon again in June. We'll see exactly how that goes. I am also hoping that Jennifer Brooks and David Wiley will be able to join me again as co-hosts. Of course, life happens. So we'll just kind of see where we all end up. But I would, as of right now, I would really like to host Ancients-a-thon again myself. I'd like to also host some sort of read-along at some point this year. I did Gone with the Wind and Vanity Fair earlier this year and really enjoyed that experience. So I may come up with something like that again. We'll see. I don't really know. I mentioned earlier that I have other projects besides writing books that I would like to do, and one of those is to start a podcast with my best friend, Kariana, who is the one I go to Shakespeare Festival with every year. So I do need to convince her to get on board with that. I've kind of mentioned it to her before. She's been in Peru over the past few months, so I haven't been able to talk to her in person, but I'm meeting with her in a couple days for dinner, and I did text her about it when the idea for this podcast first came into my mind. So we'll see if I'm able to get her on board and I can do some research on how to do a podcast and where to upload it and stuff like that, because I don't really know, to be honest. So we'll have to do some stuff with that. But yes, those are my plans for this year. I'm really excited about all of them. I'm really excited about 2023. I just have a really good feeling about it. I feel like the past couple months have been going so well with my reading. I feel like I'm reading a lot more than I have in a long time. It definitely helps that I'm not in school anymore, so I have a lot more time in the evenings to do that sort of thing. I mean, I'm working full time, so it's not like I have all the time in the world, but I do have more time to read, and I've had a lot more motivation to read as I've been doing more mood reading. I think this has been a great change for me, and hopefully the experience will continue as long as possible. Obviously, life happens and things change, and it's not going to be perfect all the time. Not that it's perfect now, but it's not going to be great, and I'm not going to be happy all the time, but I'd like to savor it while it lasts, and hopefully, you know, I may have some downhills, but hopefully it's mostly uphill this next year, because honestly, the past few years have not been great. I don't talk about my personal life on here very much, but suffice it to say, I've been struggling a lot with mental health problems. I have been struggling a lot with figuring out my future, and still am, but I'm at least getting a direction to move in, which is just really nice and exciting. So anyway, all that to say, I'm excited for 2023. Let me know down below if you've read any of the books I've mentioned, your thoughts on them. Again, if you have any recommendations for any of the goals I've set. I hope you are having a wonderful reading week, a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye!